Welcome to week 40 on the tail end of our piano adventure. Today we'll start things off with our 16th note syncopation rhythm warm-up, our gold standard or contrary motion scales, and we will be going over G flat major, G flat harmonic minor, B major, and B harmonic minor, and then we will also continue our third installment of our ragtime piece, the 3/4 rag. This is the C section of a ragtime piece, and we're going to be exploring the Latin ragtime feel, which was called the habanero. That was a very popular Latin style that a lot of ragtime composers used. We're going to incorporate that in the C section of our 3/4 rag after we head over to the drum and get rhythmically warmed up. Let's get started with line 1. We'll begin with the metronome at 40 BPM, and the clicks are going to represent the upbeats. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Change your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Hands together, top line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Excellent. Let's move on to line 2. We'll turn the metronome up to 45 BPM, and now we will have every click representing the So all 4 uhs will be represented by the metronome here. One, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Switch hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Top of line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Moving on to line 3, we're going to set our metronome to halftime, so it will be at 25 BPM while we are moving at 50 BPM. We'll be looking at the third line, and each of these clicks is going to represent the first and the third Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Switch hands. 1 and 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Last but not least, let's look at line 4. We'll speed our metronome up to 30 BPM, which means we will be going at 60 BPM. And now the metronome clicks will represent the second and the fourth 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Switch hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Top line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that we're warmed up, let's head back over to the piano. Let's talk about the third section of a ragtime piece, okay? Now, the first thing that you may recognize is that we are changing keys, and this is very common for the C section, sometimes called the trio, to shift its tonal center from the 1, in this case it was A flat, and now we're shifting to the 4, which is going to be D flat, right? However, it is also common sometimes to have the C section be in the relative minor. And so I thought to myself, well, why don't I just do both, right? So I put this into the 4, right? So we shifted our tonal center to the 4, which is D flat major. And then we are going to be using D flat major's relative minor, which is B flat minor. So we are really shifting the mood of this piece from a bright A flat major to a dark B flat minor, okay? Now, in order to do that, most ragtimes have a 4-bar transition phrase that will bring you into the new key. And so that's what we have. We have a little bridge, a little intro to the C section, or also known as the trio sometimes, right? But wait, there's more, okay? Because not only are we going to change the color of our rag at this point, but we are also going to change the feeling, all right? As I mentioned at the very beginning, there is a very popular rhythm during ragtime, and it was a Latin feel, and it was called the Habanero, which was a Cuban rhythm, okay? Now, if you look at the bass line, it's going to be very similar throughout the whole piece, where you have a dotted 8th and a 16th, and then 2 8th notes, and that gives you this sort of lilted rhythmic bass that has a very Latin characteristic to it, all right? And the reason I did that, it was really just a compositional choice. You don't have to change the feel if you don't want to in the C section, but I just thought since I was had made up my mind that I wanted to go to B flat minor. I just think that the habanero rhythm goes so well with those darker tones. It almost makes me think of a tango in a way, right? And so we're not only going to have this darker color, but also a more sensual rhythm for this section. Now, formally speaking, this is going to be very similar to all ragtime sections, okay? There's not a lot of creativity there. We have 16 measures, and those 16 measures are made out of 2 groups of 8, and the first 2 phrases on each of those groups is exactly the same, and they are both resolved differently. Okay, so it's the same form we've been seeing, nothing new there. We have our new color, our new feel, we have our transitionary phrase to get us there, and now we just need to dive in and actually look at some of these chords that we're going to be playing. So how do we use 4 measures to get from A flat major to B flat minor? Well, the first thing I did is I came up with an idea in the key of A flat using a mode. Okay, so as you can see, there's no chords here. And so what I took advantage of in this instance was modes, okay? I'm using the sound of modes, and I would say 3 distinct colors, all right? So we have this color, and then we have this color. So as you can see, the purple would represent the A flat, the red would represent as we shift away from that color, and then the blue is the darker color that we're shifting to. And if we were to actually label those modes, what we're going to start out with would be A flat major. Then we actually do have the outline of a C minor chord, which is a chord that exists in A major. But then how does C minor exist in the key of B flat minor? It exists as a C half diminished, as we have seen before, right? The C minor is the 3rd chord of A flat, but it is the 2nd chord of B flat minor. And in B flat minor, it has a darker color, it has the C half diminished sound, and if we're going to use a mode that goes with that, hopefully hasn't been that long since we studied the modes, so we're going to be using our C Locrian. All right, so we go from a C minor chord to a C Locrian scale, which is going to give us that hint of C becoming half diminished. Now that 2 is going to lead us to a 5, right, which here we have our F, and it's a very simple F. It's actually just an A, right? How am I getting F out of A? Well, if you think about it, the 5 of B flat is F, and F has F, A, and C. And it is that A note right there in the middle that wants to lead up to the B flat. And that's what makes the 5 to 1 sound so good. And lo and behold, we do get our B flat minor over an F still, because we're just getting into it, and we don't want to finally arrive there until we get right here. So here we finally get our B flat minor, and of course now we can use some Roman numerals now that we're in this new key, and we will label B flat minor from here on out as the 1. Okay, so let's look at that one last time. We had our A flat major chord scale. We transitioned with a C minor chord. From that C, we sprang forth with a C Locrian and changed our color to F. We put the 5. Then we got to the 1 over the 5, and finally we arrived at our 1. And now we settle into a normal harmonic rhythm. Okay, we don't have to use all the trickery that we used to modulate. Now we're going to settle into a normal pattern, which is normal for ragtime, right? And so, of course, what do you think the first thing we're going to do to really set this key in our ear? We're going to go back and forth between the 1 and the 5/7, right? So we have our B flat minor, and we have our F7, our B flat minor, and our 5/7, which is F7. And I'm just realizing we need to go back and correct this. It's a lowercase 1, right? Because it's minor. All right, continuing on, I really didn't get too creative with this section. I think that the melody itself captivated me so much that I really didn't feel like I needed to be too creative with the harmonic flow because the melody itself, in my opinion, was pretty captivating. And so I just kind of kept that going. However, when we get to this F7, I did darken it up just a little bit. I added what's called the flat 9, okay? The F7, which is the flat 9. Now what you might also recognize that you're playing is a diminished chord built off of C over F, right? So you could call this C diminished over F. You know, it doesn't matter what you call it. It just matters that we become familiar with these sounds and these shapes on the piano, right? And so when you want a darker F7 sound, you can put that C diminished on top of it, and you'll see that that gives you certain tones. It gives you the C, which is the 5, the E flat, which is the flat 7. It gives you the G flat, which is the flat 9, and then it even gives you an A, which is the third note, right? So that works out just fine, and we have that again in this measure, and of course that is going to bring us back to our B flat minor. But, surprise, I did add a major 7 to it, which gave it a little bit of grit, right? So this A would usually be an A flat, but I did decide to make it a major 7 because I wanted this extra tension in there. Moving along, we don't even need to analyze the next 4 measures because they're going to be the exact same thing we've seen so far, going back and forth between the 1 and the 5. However, this is where it gets exciting. This is where I think a really beautiful thing happens. We have set up so much minor at this point that now it's time to bring the sun out. And so we're going to modulate, surprise, surprise, to our relative major, okay? So here we have our D flat, and we're going to just do a simple 2-5-1 progression in that key. So we have our E flat minor, then we have our A flat 7, and then finally that brings us back to D flat. Now the thing is that because these sections are repeated, in this section we go back to our F7 flat 9, right? So you'll see that C diminished chord is in there, but over here when we land on our D flat, we're actually going to end up on an A flat 7 because, hint hint, maybe a spoiler alert, the 4-quarter rag might finally end in the key of D flat. And so this sound right here would perfectly take us into the D section. Let's talk about a few ragtime techniques that are happening here, okay? As you'll notice in the recording, the rag has been swung up to this point, and when we get into the habanero style, we're actually going to need to straighten that out. So as you'll hear in the recording in a few minutes, this area is going to be swung, and then I gradually reduce the amount of swing that I'm using until I straighten it out very much so, and then have sort of this big cadenza moment with these 2 pickup notes, which then leads us into our right hand melody, which is going to be very much not swung, okay? You'll also note that everything in the right hand is going to be played up 1 octave. It sounds very good up there, but we didn't want to use ledger lines, and we also didn't want to bother you with a ton of 8VA markings. And so this is a common thing. Sometimes the composer just wants you to play everything you read in the treble clef, but up 1 octave. And then last but not least, the habanero rhythm itself, okay? It's a pretty simple little rhythm, but it is very important that it's played exactly right in order to get the right feeling. At first it might take some brain power to realize that you have to line this note up with this note up with this note up with this note. You know, do what you need to do. We've done enough rhythm training at this point to be able to figure out how to line these things up. But you'll notice that once you build that muscle memory and get used to this pattern, that it's a very satisfying and fun rhythm to play. And to be honest, I feel like one of the most important notes that I kept forgetting about was always this last note here. Bum, 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 right? That last one right there. So pay special attention to that last 8th note, because sometimes we give a lot of attention to the first 3 notes, and then this is just an afterthought, but it really does serve a big purpose to launch us back down into the bass, all right? Other than that, the right hand is pretty simple in that it's just sort of winding around in scale-like fashions and outlining chords, but we don't really have any of those like anchor tones with outside octaves, none of that really going on here. But we do have to get used to our right hand being far away from us, Hopefully in these contrary motion 4-octave scales that we are practicing, this is making it more comfortable for us to have our hand up there and be playing the very familiar shapes that we knew about. But those are the harmonies, that's the form, those are the conventions, and now let's take a listen to how this is played on the piano. If you enjoyed today's lesson and would like to support the Piano Dojo, you can find these show notes and music along with much more on my website at pianodojo.com, or you can simply subscribe and share my channel with anybody who is looking for answers about the piano. Until next time, happy practicing.